Hello and welcome to the show again. It's the Beyond Quality podcast, episode 4, if I remember it correctly. And yeah, actually, I've been thinking a lot about how much the job market has changed recently, and we'll get a lot of questions about that. And to discuss this um, issue, we have incredible guests with us today. Hannah Reynolds and Mike Jarrett. We met on Hostaf conference recently, where you gave a workshop about how to stand out on the current market, how to be the top choice for all the companies, and yeah, how to navigate this tough market. Could you please introduce yourself and maybe, um, yeah, introduce a bit why are you focusing on this area and how did you prepare your workshop on HostUp and what's your motivation to create it?
Okay, cool. Thank you for the introductions, Maria. Hannah, do you mind if I go first?
Absolutely. You go for it, Mike.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Mike Jarrett. I've been working in this industry now for the best part of 35 years. And without going into huge detail, the favorite thing that keeps me working in this industry is working with people. I'm not really a technologist at heart. What I do is I like being able to work in technology so I can work with amazing people. And over the years of building teams and hiring people and helping teams perform well, I've realized that my real passion is around knowledge transfer to people, mentoring and coaching people, and also helping them with their careers. And I'm not a qualified person in this field, but I think my experience gives me a certain amount of leverage when it comes to these conversations, and I seem to be able to help people. And with that in mind, 3 years ago at Hustef, I was the program chair, and I wanted to do something differently to leave my mark on Hustef in 2023. And I came up with the idea of the career clinic. And what that basically was an opportunity to bring really good, experienced senior practitioners in our field together with people that had career challenges and host 40-minute sessions where they could give clarity on what their current situation was and to have a conversation with somebody more experienced about how they could remove some of their blockers to help them get to where they want to be. And those sessions have landed really well with all of the people that have been part of the career clinic. And also the wonderful people from our community, and Maria, you're one of them, and Hannah as well, who have helped by being the mentors in those sessions. Also seem to get quite a lot out of it as well. So it seems to be quite a successful thing. And part of the motivation from the workshop was really understanding what people were looking for in terms of support through all of the sessions that we've held. And through the career clinic itself, we kind of advised and helped probably about 44 people now. And I've been understanding the patterns about what people are looking for in terms of help. And they're very, very common across most people. And so I spoke to Hannah, who I work with very closely in our company, about could we do something in terms of a workshop that helps to share the information that we have in terms of helping people at scale so we can reach more people in a much more consultative way to give them the benefit of our experience. So that's me, and that's why we're talking today. I'm going to hand over to Hannah to carry on.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Hannah. I am a talent acquisition specialist in the technology space. I've exclusively recruited in quality engineering and testing my entire career. I fell into testing as a market, but I loved it for the same reason as Mike. It's super people focused, which in tech you often don't find that much. At the moment, I'm a senior talent partner for a testing consultancy. I work very closely with Mike. We are pure play quality engineering and tests. So I spend my days a lot of the time talking to people in the testing space, helping them with their careers, helping them navigate the current job market, which, as we all know at the moment, is a little bit tough. It's been tough for a couple of years, but I get real satisfaction from communicating with people, talking about their careers, helping them navigate that journey. So when Mike asked me to be part of the career clinic, and for us to create what we do on a daily basis as both a hiring manager and somebody who works in the talent space, specifically in testing, coming and bringing those two lenses together to give advice, guidance, support, and just a bit more insight that's a bit hidden in the industry. I think that's my main motivation for the career clinic and for helping people, is to give them a real insight into what is actually happening. We'll touch on it, but the hidden job market, how to actually market yourself and sell yourself, which is arguably one of the hardest things to do, and we all hate it. But this was a real opportunity at Hustef to bring all of what we do on a daily basis to life, as Mike said, in a workshop to help people at scale and en masse.
And what really stood out to me about the workshop was that when, we're looking at Mike and Hannah, and we've listened to both your experiences here, you're bringing the whole spectrum. I mean, looking at it from a recruitment perspective, as well as from the perspective of someone who's also going to be making the final hiring decision, right? I am guessing that really, gave candidates a comprehensive view of how they can approach this. Whereas I think as a candidate, even I'm guilty of doing this myself, we are prone to locally optimize for the one or the other, right? And in terms of, like, how did the dynamics of that play out? Like, what do you feel like? I mean, maybe both of you can go about this each other, you could take turns about answering this. And maybe Hannah, you could go first in terms of how do candidates, what are the biggest, let me say, what are the biggest pitfalls that candidates often encounter when it comes to working with the recruitment side of things?
From a recruitment side of things, I think we're all guilty of overcomplicating the job market and your career. So starting right with the very basics of figuring out, before you even start looking for a role or you want to have a conversation with a recruiter or someone in the talent space, what do I actually want? And it's okay if you don't know the answer to that question. It's also perfectly okay to be really honest with the people you're talking to about that, especially if you're a little bit more junior in your career, or maybe you're a career changer, or you are at a bit of a crossroads where you don't know if you should go into leadership and management or keep your skills technical. Being honest and transparent and really open is something that I think people really do fall down on. They're a bit scared to say how they actually feel about the job market, what they actually want, or where they want their career to go. So it all starts with that alignment right from the very beginning, and actually giving yourself time to figure out what you want in the next step. Mike speaks about this incredibly well, from a needs, wants, and values point of view, and he really brought that to life in the workshop. Not just in the workshop we did at Hustef, but just throughout your career, Mike. I think you've touched on it with many different people from all different backgrounds, linking it to coaching as well. So maybe you want to share a bit more about that.
Yeah, so where I look at it from a recruiter's point of view, I have in my history done some recruitment. I have worked as a recruiter, I think for about 3 months. It was an interim gig, and I thought I'd try my hand at it. And I placed a head of test, which is great, and I got the commission, so I loved it. But it wasn't for me as a job. But as a hiring manager, and also as a person who changes jobs fairly frequently, I do realize the value of staying engaged with a good network of people. In-house recruiters who work specifically for organizations trying to bring their own talent in, but also agency recruiters, and maintaining those relationships, because you don't want to wait until you're suddenly made redundant or you suddenly realize you want to change jobs to start to build the networks up, because then you're behind the curve. You're behind a lot of people who the agencies, the recruiters are already talking to. So one of the things that we talked about in our workshop was really making sure you've got the right networks in place, make sure you've got the right profile to sell yourself, the right kind of networking activities happening. So you've got a presence in the industry, so that when the time comes, you're already in people's minds, and it's not a process of catching up behind the rest of the crowd. And it's super important at the moment because, as Hannah touched upon, the market at the moment is difficult for people. There's a lot more people looking for fewer jobs. And so anybody who's looking for a job either externally in the marketplace or even internally in a large organization, if you want to have an internal move, you need to make sure that you're at the front of that arrowhead so that when you start to talk to people, you're the first person they think about in terms of getting you through the interview and selection process. And that was really quite an important message that we land in the workshop and give people advice and ideas and tips about how to do that well, and talk about the benefits. And Anupam, you asked a question. We made the point about what we bring to the table with this is different sides of the coin. You know, the hiring side of it, which is Hannah. The recruiting side, which is Hannah, and the hiring side, which is me. And because we bring those perspectives together, it helps us really take people through the end-to-end process in its entirety. And what Hannah does in the workshop is say, well, this is what good best practice looks like in terms of things you can do, the strategies that you can have in your toolbox to be super engaged with the industry, super engaged with networks so that you land the best jobs. And then what I do is I then say, but this is how I do it. And often it's context. You know, you've got different ways of approaching different things and getting different results. An example of it is Hannah is super strong on using social media platforms to raise your profile. And that's absolutely brilliant. I don't do it as much as I could do because I prefer face-to-face engagement and having very targeted network connections that are offline, but I know they're there for me when I need them. That's the way I prefer to work. So we get the same result, but by doing things in a slightly different way. So the workshop brings together the best practice advice, all the things that you could do, and I then bring a little bit of I wouldn't call it realism, but practical practitioner experience of what it's really like and how to make those things work for you in the best way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really nice. And I've been thinking a lot about how market has changed just in a few years. And recently, a few years ago, it was enough just to show up and kind of, okay, say I'm available on the market and I'm here. Please grab me and so on. But right now, it's not enough. It's not enough. You have to showcase. You have to show up on the social media, on the conferences, on public speaking occasions, and so on and so on. So could you please share a bit more on the exact strategies that one could use and to kind of complete the puzzle of all of these complicated things that you have to keep in mind while applying for a job or while searching for a new position?
Definitely. To bring a bit of context into what the current lay of the land looks like with the job market right now, and I can share some stats on this. Over the last year in the UK specifically, we've seen about a decrease of 18% in advertised roles specifically for test automation skill sets. When we look at the amount of people who are currently open to work versus how many live roles have actually been advertised, there's about 15,000 people in the UK within the testing market that are open to work currently. And in the last few months, there's only been between 1,000 to 2,000 live roles advertised. So when you actually look at how many candidates are actually looking for work and the competition that you're up against, you're so right, Maria. It's not enough to just be good at what you do anymore and to just kind of put a post out and say, yeah, I'm here. So when we look at strategies and tactics, I think what is really important is all of these should be done, in my opinion, at every stage of your career, not just when you're looking for a new role, when you want that promotion or you want to change company, whatever it may be. It's taking action and doing it consistently with intention as much as you can throughout your whole career. So the first thing I would recommend anyone do is, if you're currently employed at the moment, look about look at how you can expand your personal brand internally, first of all. So, first of all, ask yourself, what am I known for internally? Do I have visibility over my work? I think a lot of pitfalls that people fall into is my manager knows everything I'm doing, or people in the business know who I am, or what I do, or that I'm a subject matter expert in this area. That's not true. So being intentional and being vocal about the work you do, but not just what you do, the value and the impact on the wider business, I'd always start there. And that translates really nicely into starting to be able to build an external brand for yourself that you can leverage on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the go-to platform at the moment. I spend a lot of my day hanging out on LinkedIn looking for people. And the misconception is I need to post 15 million times a year to be able to have some personal brand, right? No, fogs. I think people misinterpret that your personal brand on LinkedIn can come from so many different things. So, as an example, my favorite thing to see is recommendations on somebody's LinkedIn profile. They're right at the bottom, so people forget about them. But if you're a recruiter or hiring manager, you don't forget about them. Um, I love the saying that your brand isn't what you say about yourself, it's what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Your recommendations do exactly that for you. And a real life example of an actual recommendation is me being able to work with Mike now. I've known Mike for a number of years. Mike is obviously very well respected in the industry. And Mike kept a really good relationship with me, even when he didn't necessarily need to, because he wasn't actively looking for a role. But Mike is recommended by a lot of people. So when I was recruiting for a role, I reached out to Mike and said, "Hey, Mike, I'm hiring for a role. It's really tough. Do you know anyone?" And Mike and I got talking, and Mike said, "Actually, I might be interested." So building relationships, having recommendations, especially on your LinkedIn profile that are visible, which can start from raising your profile internally and making those networks with, I don't know, the finance team, marketing, with talent, with people and culture, whoever that looks like, raise your profile, make your work visible is what I'd say initially.
Can I add something to what Hannah said? Because Hannah spoke about a lot of really good things, but there's one super important word that Hannah landed on. It's called value. And when you think about there being a lot of competition for jobs internally as well as externally, um, people need to be able to describe the value they bring to the organization. Sometimes the way I think about it is if I'm going to go for a new role somewhere, how can I convince somebody that my actions are going to pay for my salary? What is the bottom line I'm bringing to the organization? And a lot of people in our industry, rightly so, talk about the activities that they do. And they may even, say, well, I was able to increase, automation test coverage by 90% on a key platform. And it meant we could actually ship in 2 days rather than 2 weeks. And they talk about those kind of like logistical things, which are fabulous. But everybody talks about those things. So there's no differentiator. And I think what people really need to get better at is talking about the value bring. So how do you do things in a way that brings greater efficiency to an organization? And how do you measure that? How do you demonstrate that value? Or the effectiveness of the role that you undertake? How does that impact business performance? Or how does it mitigate operational risk? Or even, do you work in a way that helps other people improve the productivity of teams? And if so, what does that mean in terms of benefits to an organization? And there's a piece of translation that I think we all need to get better at in our industry, which is actually talking about the benefit of the work that we do, not the logistics and the activities that we do to provide that benefit. And if we can start to do that better, you'll find yourself at the tip of the arrowhead when you're trying to get ahead of the game. Because hiring managers want to know about the value you bring to an organization. And when you get to the final stage interview with a hiring manager, you've probably, and Hannah, you can check me on this, but you've gone through one or two screening calls with the recruiter. You may have gone through an initial screening technical call, then maybe a technical evaluation, some kind of exam or assessment to prove that you know what you're talking about. And then you get to meet the hiring manager at the end of the process. Um, and by that stage, the hiring manager already knows technically you're fit for the role. They already know that you've been screened by the in-house recruiter or an external recruiter to check the cultural fit is going to be there. You know the benefits and package is going to be okay. The hiring manager knows the sort of salary you're looking for. So actually, when you get to that final stage, it's yours to win, not yours to lose. And what you need to be able to do is convince the hiring manager that you've got something to offer, which is going to really add value to the organization. And the conversation shouldn't be about how much test automation coverage you've done. It should be about the benefits and the impact of your role in that company. And then what you can do to help the new company achieve its strategic goals. And if you can frame the conversation, and it should be a conversation at that stage, with the hiring manager, you've got a much, much better chance of success and getting hired.
And talking about value, as Mike touched on, it's so important at interview, but you can start doing that now on your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn post, within your organization. If you're looking at getting a promotion within your current teams, start thinking about the way you're communicating that language. And externally, when we look at our external personal brand on LinkedIn, let's say, one of the biggest pitfalls I see is people don't utilize their about you section or their job title and their bio. Normally it's, I am a quality engineering professional with 8 years experience in the industry. I have done X, 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 X. And it's all about the action, as Mike said. It's not about the value or the impact that are there. So that's something really tangible that anybody listening can look at straight away. Look at your about you section. See, oh, I've fallen into the trap. I'm there. I've just put, I've done X, Y, and Z, but I haven't demonstrated that value. You can change that immediately. And those people genuinely really stand out to recruiters. Like, you see hundreds of profiles, hundreds of CVs a day sometimes when you have applicants. And those that stand out are the ones who really take the time to craft a well-constructed initial paragraph at the top of your CV or on your LinkedIn profile that has that impact and value statement straight away off the bat. So yeah, think about it throughout your whole career journey, not just in interview, at all stages.
Again, I'm sorry, Anupam, please go ahead.
No, I was just reflecting on how, something that Hannah said earlier about delivering value. A lot of candidates fall into the trap of thinking that delivering value is enough for you to progress in your career. But there is a gap between delivering value and communicating value. And even internally in your company, you cannot take it for granted that when you've delivered value, that this value is communicated. So that's a great place to start off. And then doing that externally is even harder. But once you've done it internally, you have a good basis for doing that. But we do keep speaking about delivering value. But what would really help me as a candidate, if I were to put myself in the shoes of a candidate, is example of where you've seen candidates actually communicate their value effectively. Do some of these, does an example or two come to mind immediately?
Yeah, totally. So, sorry, Anna.
No, I was going to pass over to you because we were talking about a candidate we had at 2i, a real life scenario of somebody who really stood out. So I was actually going to ask you, Mike, to share because it's resonated with both of us.
Sure. So, it really depends what it is you do as a role as to how you go about articulating value. But if I just pick on test automation, because it's obviously the thing that everybody kind of understands and knows about, test automation is, a good thing to have in your CV. But ultimately, if we do it well, what you're doing is actually you're helping an organization cut cost often because you can actually reduce the amount of people who are doing manual testing, or you're increasing productivity because what you're able to do is actually do more work and ship more features with the same number of people in the team. Or you're looking at the effectiveness, which is maybe improving test coverage and doing it more rapidly. And that can actually help to mitigate all kinds of technology and business risks. So it's tying your activities back to those three things. And I have this as a mantra I talk to everybody about. Think about representing your values through efficiency, which is cost savings or cost avoidance. Think about representing your values through efficiency. What do you help the business achieve, and can you help them do it more quickly? As effectiveness and productivity. Are you actually helping the company achieve more? And qualify it and quantify it, put some numbers around it. If you can't put numbers around it, it becomes quite subjective and it's opinion based. But if you can say, I helped an organization ship 50% more features through automation in the CI/CD pipeline, which meant we could go to market with more value and increased our sales by 25%, which equated to £250,000. That is real benefit that you're talking about through the application of automated testing. And that's an example of what I look for from people. When I've got 5 CVs, it will say the same thing. If they're people that really thought about the impact of their work and they can articulate it, those are the people I want to work with because they understand business. And we're all here working quality engineering to support our businesses well. That's an example.
Yeah. That's really interesting because recently I've been talking to some of the recruiters, and the recurring item in our dialogues was that it's really good to keep a kind of a document where you write down everything you do every week, every month, whatever, but regularly. Because it's easy to forget when you work for a company for a few years, and then what I was doing, maybe I increased efficiency, but I don't remember, and that was one of the advice that I've got. And then the second thing that was quite common, it was to use a star framework to frame this your achievements and your work goals, so to say. And what do you think? Is it a good guideline to kind of use this recommended frameworks like star and so on, or is it or should it be more authentic and more natural, I would say, in the CV right now when we have a lot of AI generated CVs?
Yeah.
Pretty much tailored to job announcements, and how to approach this situation when there is less human in CVs today right now.
Such a good point. And to touch on the first half of that, talking about using your CV as a strategic tool rather than a file that's just left at the back of your computer and you only update it when you look at having a new role. I encourage everybody to update your CV multiple times a year, even if you're not looking, because you will forget what you've done. The one thing that's really difficult, as we've touched on, is actually quantifying value. And sometimes I think if you feel you're a bit more junior or you're part of a larger team in a huge organization, you don't always know the actual impact. But I would really encourage anybody to ask that question. Go to your line manager and say, we've just done this huge piece of work. What was the impact on the business? How are we seeing this reflected in our customers? What does this look like to the market? One, it shows huge commercial awareness. So if you're thinking, maybe I need to look elsewhere, and you're not aware of opportunities internally, if you ask questions like that to your line manager, they're automatically thinking, okay, this person's thinking about outside the box. They care about their career. They care about the business and the wider impact. So you're raising your profile internally just by asking one simple question that you can take and use it on your CV if you need to go externally. So 2 birds, 1 stone, that mindset. So I'd always recommend keeping a working document of your CV that you tweak and amend constantly. So that's the first point. And Maryia, you make such a good point about AI writing CVs for you, using templates. first of all, we can spot, I would say this on behalf of all recruiters in the industry and hiring managers. Mike, you can vouch for this as well, but you can spot an AI generated CV a mile off, a mile off. We know all of the tips and tricks. What I'm seeing a lot of people doing at the moment is hiding keywords and skills in white text in the back of their CV to get through. Yeah, it happens. And if I see anybody do that, even if you have the best CV and you might be the best candidate for that job, because you have lied on your CV, it's an immediate rejection. So I would always recommend that people tailor the CV and use a framework that actually works, like STAR that you touched on, Maryia. And Mike and I are big fans of STAR. I am from a CV point of view, also in a phone screen as well. If people can really tangibly link their situation, the task, the action, and the result together in a really concise way and answer the question that's being asked of them, without going on a free flow tangent, it shows that one, you know how to prioritize your experience, you know the impact that you've had, and also you know what the recruiter wants to hear from you as well. Like you're being more tailored and streamlined. So I would always recommend STAR and not using, please don't use AI to write a CV. It's fine sometimes with structure, but at least change and edit it and let it be you, is my advice.
Well, the reason we're both fans of Star, but the reasons I'm a really big fan of Star, and for anybody listening in and watching this podcast, if they don't know what Star is, it's a framework of actually positioning information. So if a hiring manager asks you a question, it's really useful to use STAR as a thinking process. So the S for STAR is about the situation. What's the context you were operating in and what was the problem? The T is the task. So what did you do to try and address the problem statement that was wrapped up in that context or situation? The A is then what is the action that you took? And the R is the result. And of course, when it goes back to benefits, the R is the value that you bring to the organization through that. So STAR gives you a way of actually going from problem statement to benefit. But also, it's just a really good framework for telling a story. And our brains are hardwired to listen to people telling stories. It's how we've communicated since we were cave people. And an interview should be a conversation. And if you can tell stories in your conversation with somebody, it makes it engaging, it brings it to life, it makes it interesting, and sometimes quite compelling. And if you can tell a couple of good stories in an interview using the STAR method, then you'll start to have that opportunity to strike up a really good emotive relationship with the person who's maybe going to be your boss in the future. So it's really effective for those reasons. Also, I just wanted, if you don't mind, just to kind of like roll back about 5 minutes. Then we were talking about asking if you don't know what the benefit of your work is and the value of the work. And the really easy thing that people often miss is if you're working on a project or a program, have a look at the business case. Because the business case will have been written by somebody that says, we're going to spend £250,000 doing this work in order for these things to then happen. Okay, that's why you have the sponsorship to do the work. That's why you do testing, to check that the work is going to land well and the end users are going to be able to use whatever system changes that you're making to accrue the business benefit. So the business case at the beginning talks about what you're looking to achieve as an organization. And then at the end of it, there's normally a process of benefits realization. Are we now able to do the things that we wanted to as a result of doing the software development piece and releasing the software? And if the answer is yes, by looking at the business case and benefits realization, you've got the answer. But so many people forget to look or don't know to look. So it's quite a good tip just to get people thinking about those documents that support the work that we do.
That's a fantastic tip, because what I also see some of my peers hesitating, and some of this hesitancy also I've displayed in the past, is, let's say you have a business case and you deliver the project as a team, and you are an integral part of the team, so it's okay for you to own the results of that as well. I mean, everybody understands that you're applying for a test automation role, for example, and that you've played a certain part in that, right? So I guess I think it's important also for us to not shy away from taking credit sometimes, in terms of also, credit for what we have delivered together as a team. And in the resume or in the CV, you just have one line for expressing things. You have to be strategic about the words you use there, right? Like, so I guess that's another part of what I've seen candidates hesitate and struggle with.
Massively. I see the use of we on a CV constantly. So when I get into a screening call with a candidate, the first thing I'm doing is, you mentioned we did X as a team. What was your direct involvement in that project? And it's honestly one of the biggest pushback areas I get from hiring managers. Even if I've had a really good conversation with a candidate, they've explained it to me, I put it in the notes. When it gets to hiring manager review stage and that interviewer is looking at that CV and interrogating it, and they've seen hundreds of other CVs, they don't have it clear what value you've or what action you've actually done. So you make such a good point there about really getting to grips with selling yourself on a CV. Like, it can feel a bit icky to say, I've done this and you can feel like you're bragging, but your CV is the best place to brag. You need to have confidence in what you've delivered and the action you've taken and the result. So I would say no use of we, use of I, and shout about what you've done with pride, for sure.
And like one more thing that I love to touch upon before we start wrapping this conversation up is talking about how relationships come before resume. Mike, you spoke about this. You touched upon this earlier, and what I'm broadly seeing is that we have to take a longer term view of our careers and also prioritize relationships. But from a hiring and a recruitment perspective, relationships before resumes. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, totally can. And I'm going to throw in a little bit of information here that we haven't touched upon yet. But and this is Hannah's field, by the way, but I've listened to her a lot. But 50% of the jobs that people get hired for are never advertised. So when you think about that, and you think about the ratios that Hannah was describing earlier in a contracting market, there's sometimes like a 15-to-1 ratio, 15 people all applying or getting down selected as potential candidates for one role. And that's a lot of competition. And then when you consider that 50% of the roles aren't advertised anyway, it's like, well, how do you access that kind of hidden job market? And you only access it by being well networked and well connected to people. And what you don't do is try to network with people with the intention of getting hired by them. What you want to do is network with people so that they can build an understanding of you as a person. You can build an understanding of them. You build a network of people around you who start to understand what your personal brand is, what you stand for, what your values are, how you like to operate, what your direct strengths are, what you can bring to a company. And at the time, then when somebody wants to hire somebody, if they're not advertising it, they'll reach into their network. Sometimes it might be a discreet approach to someone like Hannah saying, Hannah, I haven't got a budget to go through an agency, so I'm not going to pay you, but can you recommend a couple of people I should talk to? And Hannah will probably do that because it's about building relationships and doing the right thing to help people. Or they may say to other people in the industry, do you know anybody who's good at this, who can solve this problem for me? And those roles and opportunities fall to the people that are well networked and well introduced to decision makers. And I wouldn't call it fortunate. I've been able to land my last 4 roles without interviewing and without applying, because they've been situations where people know me because of the events I run, or because of the talks I've given, or because of my relationship with people, that when an opportunity has come, they just walk up and say, Mike, can you help us with this? And so, yeah, so what's your problem? What are you trying to do? So, well, we've got this situation at work, so you could probably do a bit of this and a bit of that, and suddenly you've landed a job. And you haven't gone through any of the formal process. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens as a lot of hard work in the background. And I remember when I was running an event called the Test Management Forum in London, and then the Technology Leadership Forum, I turned it into a bit bigger than test management. I was spending probably in every quarter a month of evenings finding speakers, finding content, finding topics, organising the event, doing the marketing, trying to sell the tickets for it, getting sponsors on board, and all of those things. And it was brilliant fun, but incredibly hard work. And after about 4 years, I was worn out by it, absolutely exhausted by it. And I reflected on it. I thought, well, actually, I've got nothing out of this, but I wasn't doing it to get anything out of it. But then I got a job with a consultancy who used to sponsor the event. And when they needed somebody senior to come in, they said, well, you know, Mike, we've sponsored his event. Let's go and talk to him. Another opportunity came up at a building society. They needed somebody to lead an 18-month transformation program. And the hiring manager was in the room at the event I just organised. And she walked up to me and said, can you come and help us with this? I didn't have an interview. I just got the job. And then Hannah mentioned it. I mean, with the opportunity where we now work together at a company called 2i, because she was reaching out to me because she had a thorny recruitment problem and I happened to be in a market that she didn't know, I landed that job. I did have to interview, but actually I knew Hannah and I had the perfect internal advocate. And my hiring manager knew me from industry because we spoke on the same conferences. So it just makes life easier. But then back to your question, Anupam, it's about building relationships first with people. And if you can do that and you don't do it to get a reward of finding a job, you do it for the right reasons of helping people, it comes back to you. It's karma. My friend picked that.
I just want to add on to that, Mike, because I mean, you've summarized it so wonderfully. But some tangible tips for people who may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed or they don't know where to start with building a network or building relationships, or they may feel not as confident to approach people or reach out. I'd always recommend people, you start small, start with where you know, and go back to building your internal brand first to give you confidence. So networking internally and doing it in a way that isn't about what can I get from this person? Can I get a promotion in the future? Can I get visibility? It's what can I give that person that, as Mike said, will return back to me maybe at some point in the future. When you start internally, you build that confidence. You know, go outside of your team, first of all, look at other areas in the business that you might think are a bit scary to approach. I mean, just start with nice areas like talent or people and culture and just build good relationships there first. But once you've got that confidence of speaking to people, forming relationships, you can then apply that externally. And whether it is going to an event, for some people, that's a bit overwhelming at the start. But if you go to an event with just the idea in mind of you're just going to be an attendee and you're going to go and speak to one person, two people, you're going to go over and say, hi, how are you? Start conversation organically in a way that isn't forced, just having a normal conversation, that goes a long way. And challenging yourself every time then after you go to another event or you look at something that's a bit bigger or you go to a different city or you go somewhere like Hustef, which is a huge conference. You'll build your confidence that way. Of course, you can also do it on LinkedIn. Reaching out to agency recruiters are fantastic. I used to be agency side. They speak to candidates and people in your market day in, day out. Normally always happy to have a conversation. They'll give you market insight and what the landscape is currently doing. So that's already quite a nice conversation to have to give you awareness. But then you've also built a contact that you could use in the future for when you need them. Also, industry thought leaders. Yeah, I don't know of anybody personally that I have reached out to and said, hey, I found your LinkedIn profile, love what you're doing at the moment. You recently spoke at this conference. I'd love to hear more about the work you do in this space. Have you got 5 minutes for a coffee? I haven't had anybody that I've asked say, no, why are you messaging me that for? One, it's a compliment to that person. And people like compliments, right? Especially in the professional and your career sense. Like if somebody's saying to you, I've recognized the work you've done in this area, it's going to make them feel good. Obviously do it with a genuine interest, of course. But that's a really nice place. And it seems scary because you're reaching out to someone that you don't know. But I promise if you are authentic and genuine and you craft a message that's really tailored and personalized to somebody, they're not going to say no. They're going to value the fact you've asked for 5 minutes for a coffee. So that's what I'd recommend as some tangible steps for anybody who's thinking, how on earth do I build relationships in this market? Hopefully that helps.
Can I add one more thing just quite quickly to this? And it's in the forefront of my mind because I had a career coaching call with a mentee of mine yesterday, and it came up in conversation that they didn't feel that they got the right pay rise that they deserved, and we talked about why that might be, and they said, well, my manager doesn't really understand the value of the work that I do. I said, okay, why is that? And we got talking about how that person went about demonstrating value. So, well, I'll do all this work and then I'll tell my manager, and I expect my manager to sell my value into the pay review and the bonus and the moderation process. I said, well, you've got two issues there. First of all, is you're relying on somebody else to advocate for you and to be your representative. And even if they do that, it'll only work if they do it well. And like a lot of people, your line manager probably doesn't know how to sell very well. So even if they've got your best interests at heart, they may not do a very good job of it. So you've got to have ownership of that. And so internally, we started talking about techniques that they could employ to build a more informed network of decision makers about the value of the work they do. Because what you find in organizations is that the senior leadership team will have a challenge, and it'll be something along the lines of, we've got 50 people who all deserve to get a number one performance rating and the best bonus and the best pay rise, but we can only afford to give that to 10 people. And so the 10 people that get that number one performance rating are the ones whose value is understood by the people in the room making the decision. So you need to start to influence the people who are going to be making those decisions in your company. And the way you do that is by having a personal relationship with them, not just through your line manager. And a good way to actually have that conversation with them is to find out what sort of risks they're carrying and what your work does to mitigate their risk. And sometimes it might be, I tell you what, I've got enough work on my plate at the moment. I can't really afford to do much more, but I really want to get to know the head of operations well. I'm just going to see if I can have a coffee with the head of operations and find out what their big risks are. And if there's something we could be doing differently that helps to mitigate that risk on their behalf, maybe I could talk to them about that. And maybe we could get that idea on the backlog and then process it as a piece of work so it delights that stakeholder. And if you do that, and that stakeholder finds themselves in a much better position as a result of the work you've done, they will give you that pay rise. They will advocate for you, and it won't be a line manager doing it. So it's about extending that internal network as well as what we described about the network externally in the industry too.
Wow, there's so much good stuff that we touched upon in today's conversation, but I also get the feeling, as I'm kind of forced to wrap this up now for time, that there's so much that we're leaving here untouched, and we should probably get together for another round whenever our schedules cooperate. But this has been a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation, and mainly from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have as much visibility into the hiring and recruitment side of things. I think there's lots of information here that can make you be more strategic and be more deliberate about how you can further your own career. And definitely what I take away from this is to not approach this from a, position of, I need a job in the short term and I'm going to do it. I'm going to build a resume and look for jobs in the short term, to taking a longer term view of careers, relationships. And Hannah, a lot of what you speak comes across as making it easier for candidates to do this by starting internally and then amplifying that externally. So I think there's a gold mine of advice here in this podcast alone. And it was fantastic having both of you here. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with the community here. And we'll be sure to include your links so that people can reach out to you and also continue this conversation offline. But it has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And of course, as you said, if anybody wants to reach out, hopefully we'll do another session if we need to. But yeah, it's been lovely to speak to you both. Thank you for such great questions. I could probably chat for another 3 hours if we had the time.
it's been great fun. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and to connect with your communities as well as the people we already know. So that's been lovely. Yeah, and if people want any more information, or indeed if people are interested in the workshop and how we can run that for them, we'll be delighted to have that conversation with them and give people the full day immersion, which will give them all the answers they need.
Amazing. Thank you very much for coming and for sharing invaluable advice. And I hope to see you on one of the next episodes because, as you said, there are so many questions that we would like to kind of have extended conversation on. So thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you.